Hello, everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. And today is the 4th of June. It is Thursday, and it is 2020. Welcome in. We're going to continue where we left off yesterday on this PC diagnostic. And I'm going to get a little bit snarky only because it seems that no matter how many times I say it, people don't listen. But there have been a number of people leaving comments telling me how to do my job, which is, what everybody enjoys hearing. Everybody who does something for a living enjoys having a complete stranger on the internet tell them how to do their job. I mean, if you wouldn't want somebody to do that to you, then don't do it to other people. It's not cool. So a lot of comments got deleted last night over people who know everything, and yet somehow I managed to stay in business for 29 years. Never heard of you before and never had your advice. I wonder how I had 29 years of pure luck. So a little snark to get us started there. Please don't do that. If you wouldn't want anybody to do it to you, please don't do it to me. Michael Dane just made a very large contribution here, $50. He says, Carey, let's start the show out with a big bang. Bang indeed. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for such a generous contribution. $5 also comes in from Colin Hunt, and Hugh Wong contributes $2. And Tom Jackson at $7.77. He says, we demand. Nice. A couple other earlier contributions. One from Tony Wallow for $1.99. Rick Lakes at $5. Rick Hubbard at £3. Thank you guys so much, all of you, for supporting the channel. I appreciate your kindness and your support of the channel. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to pick up where we left off on this computer repair. This was sent in by a viewer in Ohio. His name is Douglas. It's something he built, or he had a friend help him build it, and it was running fine for some time, and now it no longer even posts. Now, I haven't spoken to Douglas on the phone. This is very unusual. My schedule has been quite hectic, and if I had 10 minutes, I would call Douglas and I would say, tell me the story. There's always a story. I want to know what happened the day before. Everything was running fine. Sometimes the customers can clue you in even if they don't think it's viable information. They may not know unless they're asked. In this case, I've been so busy, I'm just taking it and dealing with it sort of blind. The information I have is very limited, only that it did work for about a year and a half. Now it doesn't. He's changed out the CPU, and it didn't make any difference, and that's sort of where we're at. Any other work he's done, I didn't ask, so I don't know. But I can tell you, yesterday during the broadcast, I had to put the cooler on because he shipped it without a cooler, and I had to move the graphics card. It was in the wrong slot. And it took up a lot of time in handling a lot of business that had happened over the course of the days I wasn't broadcasting, getting caught up and up to speed with everything. And it didn't leave much time for me to continue the diagnostic. So without further ado, I want to pull the motherboard out of this case because nothing I did, I also pulled all the RAM and moved it around in different sockets. And we're just not getting a post. We're not getting a power on self-test. So the fans are turning, the power light comes on, we get every indication that it's working, except just nothing happens on the screen. And times like this and situations like this, with this extreme lack of information that I have and the very basic things that I've set in place before I began the test, leans me to pulling the system, pulling the motherboard away from the case and working on it in an open area where I can more readily diagnose what is working versus what isn't working. Now, I've got a box out here, an old motherboard box. This is not the box his motherboard came in. This is actually, it's pretty close. It's an X470 AORS motherboard box, and he does have an X470 AORS motherboard, but it's a different model. I don't want you to get thrown by the information on the box. It is just a box. I don't want to scratch the countertop, so when I pull the motherboard out, I'm going to set it on that box. I'm going to use my own power supply and my own graphics card just to ensure that neither his power supply or graphics card are bad. By plugging in my own power supply and my own graphics card, if we experience the same symptom of no boot, then we can rest assured that those items here are okay, that his power supply and GPU are also more than likely okay. On the other hand, if it does boot, then the diagnostic will be much faster. We either have a bad CPU or bad GPU. We'll find out here soon enough. Also, last night I put a jumper over the CMOS clear on the BIOS, just an old jumper I had laying around here. And I wanted it to sit overnight just to make sure it really clears that BIOS. So before we get started, I want to power it one more time just to make sure I didn't inadvertently fix it. So we're going to plug it in to HDMI here so we can see if it's going to boot. I've left the keyboard and mouse plugged in, but I'm going to have to turn them both on. Make sure they're both powered on. And I need a power cable. We'll plug it back in, and we're just going to go back to verifying that we exhibit the same symptoms that we saw yesterday, and that the reason the whole system was shipped to me to begin with. Customers afraid of digging too much further into it for fear that they might break something in the process and turn a bad situation worse. Now, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to work on computers, but sometimes that fear is the thing that makes you your most aware. It's oftentimes where the best lessons are learned, lessons that stick with you. But everybody's got their comfort level, and I'm more than happy to work on it, so here we are. I'm going to take my camera and put myself up here in a corner. Let's move me right up there, and we'll turn on camera input 2 where you'll see it says no signal. And I'm going to go ahead and fire it up using the power switch I hooked up yesterday. I don't want to use the customer's power switch just in case there could be a bad switch involved. And I'm going to turn the power supply switch to the on position. And we'll see if, because I know for a fact that BIOS is going to be cleared, we're going to see if the machine does anything differently today. If I'm lucky, we'll get a post and all this stops. If I'm unlucky, then you're lucky because you get to see me tear down a system. We'll see which one of us is lucky today. We do have to give it a reasonable amount of time to start. By clearing the BIOS, it's just like starting the computer for the very first time. When you're building a computer and you're turning it on for the first time, you need to allow 60 to 90 seconds for that initialization to complete as it recognizes the CPU that's in there and it recognizes the RAM, sort of makes all these little adjustments. And so far, it's behaving exactly as it did yesterday. It's very consistent. Consistency is very important when diagnosing problems. There's nothing worse than something happens sometimes. Those are very, very difficult problems to diagnose. Whether they're health related or car related or computer related, intermittent problems are extraordinarily frustrating to sleuth out, to figure out. Because it only happens sometimes, how are you ever really sure you've ever fixed it? Now, because we're still seeing the same symptom, enough time has come by with no activity on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And just for the sake of being thorough, I'm going to move these two RAM modules just over one socket, just to make sure we don't have any bad sockets or anything like that. So I'm just going to move to a different channel. We'll put one here and one there, one right here on the end. We're just moving everything over one socket. I really doubt that this will make a difference, but in order to be a good computer technician, in my opinion, you can make no assumptions. You can't say, it can't be this problem because whatever you want to fill in there. Until you've tested it, it's possible. After you test it and you verify that it makes no difference, only then can you conclude it's not that. All right, you can't just, let me put it this way, you can do whatever you want to do, but if you want to be a good tech and you want to be a successful tech, every component has to be tested, no matter how unlikely you think it is as a candidate to the cause. Because if you knew what it was, you wouldn't be diagnosing it. So assuming what's good is never a good tactic for a computer technician to take. So just move the RAM over to the other RAM channel. And I just want to see if it makes any difference. I don't suppose it will. Again, I don't expect it will. However, I'm going to do it anyway just to be sure, so I can be certain. A couple other contributions have come in, so let me give a few shouts out of thanks to these generous folks. We've got Ed Schwartz contributed $2. He says, hey, Carey, I'm looking forward to the live show. Mark Stevens with a $10 contribution. He says, buy the doggy some bones. Right on, Mark. Thank you. And Q Wong with a $2 contribution. He says, do you like pachinko ball? I don't even know what that is. John Blue Nose Stugly contributed £2. He says, Carey, keep up the great work. Have a Coke on me. Thank you. Ronaldo Torres with a $10 contribution. Thank you, Ronaldo. Rick Rubisat with a €5 contribution says, have a Coke on me and happy live stream. Right on. Thank you. Kevin Arsenal with a $20 Canadian contribution says, you're worth it. Thanks, Kevin. Rick Hubbard with a £3 contribution said he's eating some smoky bacon crisps, but don't tell Carey. You better not. I'll be over there. You take those. I'm going to take those smoky bacon crisps. Nicholas Menard just contributed 20 Canadian dollars. He said, Carey, I have one essential question for you. Do you think that if Coca-Cola were to build a factory next to your house, would they producing enough of that sweet elixir of life for you? Drink something. I don't drink that much of it. I'm sure they would more than quench my thirst if the factory was nearby. The problem would be I might try and see if they have a job. Say, see you guys later. I'm going to go work at the Coke factory. All right. This is clearly not working. So I can confidently move forward where I feel like I'm not wasting my time by shutting everything down, and we're going to remove everything. Now, the disassembly is going to be pretty quick, as you're about to witness. First thing I want to do is unplug all the power connectors. And that includes power off the back of the power supply that's powered from the wall. I always want to practice safety first. We've got the power off the GPU, and I'm going to pull the graphics card out of here right now. Motherboard power connector right up here, big connector, and the CPU power connector located up in this top corner, which is easy to get to on this case, thankfully. I just noticed there's a dent on this heatsink. Remember, the computer was shipped to me with the graphics card in the second PCIe slot, and apparently during shipping the graphics card dented into this heat shield. It's not a big deal. It's something I only just now noticed, but I can understand now how that happened. I'm sure if the graphics card were up here, it would have been dented up here. So I don't think there would have been any way to avoid that. It was just the way it was packed. Now, I earlier disconnected all of the front port umbilicals, all the front USB. So now I just simply have to remove the screws that hold the motherboard in, and the whole board should come out. It should really be that quick and easy. So I'll grab my Milwaukee M4 cordless driver here. Crank that back up to high speed. And one of the things I like to do when I'm pulling the screws out of the board is it's important to leave one screw in, preferably somewhere in the middle, so that the board doesn't just fall out when you take the last screw out. I would also normally work with the case laying flat so that I wouldn't have to worry about the motherboard falling out. But it doesn't give you guys at home much to see if I do that. So when you see me work on computers with the machine upright like this, understand under normal circumstances without filming, this machine almost always will be laying flat, so I don't have to worry about things falling. So bear that in mind. One of the issues, of course, filming is you run into some restrictions with lighting, and you may work in awkward positions in an effort to not block the camera. And sometimes there's situations where there's nothing I can do to, apart from having somebody walk around with a camera to move around me. Sometimes you're going to look at my back on some of the repairs I do. Because there's no camera operator here, on occasion, my buddy Mitch will come over and hold the camera. And I am working on a solution for that. But for now, with the pandemic and everything, it's sort of all been put on an indefinite hold. But we'll get there. I'm certain we will get there. For whatever reason, this screw isn't coming out. It looks like they didn't tighten the standoff completely to the motherboard tray, and so when I unscrewed the screw you can't see up here at the very top, it's taken the standoff with it. So we're going to go ahead and leave that alone and deal with that after we get the board out. It's not a big deal. The last remaining screw, I've left the middle one right here, and that's because I know as soon as I take that screw out, I better have a hand on this or it's going to fall. And if it wasn't broken before, all right. Am I still missing one? I feel like I got them all. In fact, you know what? I can't have these screws up here because I'm going to set the board down. But I feel like I'm missing one. Let me grab a flashlight so I can see in there. See where it's hiding. Oh, it looks like this bottom corner one I forgot. Everything else looks okay. So I've just got one down here in the lower left that I have forgotten all about. And once again, I need to make sure I'm holding onto this board. There's still something holding us in. Don't force anything when you're working on a computer. Things should relatively easily go in and out, whether it's a video card or anything else for that matter. Something is definitely holding this board in that I cannot see. And that screw I took out also feels like the standoff's coming out with it. So these screws were over tightened in my opinion. That shouldn't be happening. 1, 2, 3. Looks like maybe this top screw up here isn't all the way out because it is taking the standoff with it. I guess I didn't get it all the way apart from the motherboard. There it goes. You see how I say you got to catch it. That's why you don't work on computers upright unless you've got a lot of experience and you know what to expect. You've got to be prepared because this system doesn't belong to me. This is a customer's motherboard and a customer's build. And I'm going to have to, I'm going to double check all these standoffs, make sure we don't have any in the wrong position. There's a standoff missing here and here. That's because they're still attached to the screws. That's what happens when you don't tighten the standoffs down tight enough or you over tighten the motherboard screws. The motherboard screws don't have to be super tight. They're just securing the board to the case. They're not airtight or anything like that. There's no reason to tighten them that far. If you over tighten these little standoffs, then of course you can strip them out. And if you strip them out, you're kind of out of luck at that point. So that's how easy that is. And in fact, that was a little more complicated only because of the two standoffs coming out with the system. And to remove those, it's pretty simple. I've got a pair of pliers around here somewhere. Needle nose pliers will work just fine. And all I have to do is find one of these screws that didn't come out. We've got one right here facing you guys. And if I put the needle nose pliers in to hold the edges of the standoff, and then I should be able to just use a screwdriver. There it goes. And we can take that motherboard screw out. And then the standoff right here, this is the standoff. See, I kind of scratched it up a little bit with the pliers, but nobody's going to see it. That one was the one that was down here in this corner. And then we have another standoff, which is at the top somewhere in the top middle right here. And I just need to hold the standoff and keep it from turning. And then that way I can reverse the screw out from the standoff. So I've got that screw out now. It's not a big deal. And then once again, there's our standoff. And I can get back in here and I can grab this 5mm ratcheting socket that I have here. And that's the size of all these standoffs. And what I can do, and what I always do back in the day when cases didn't have standoffs pre-installed, they give you a baggie and you had to figure out which holes you needed to use. I have this tool which allows me to tighten the standoff properly. This is a 5mm socket, and this enables me to tighten these down to what I feel is a proper torque without any concern of over tightening and stripping the threads out. And I want to check them all, because if two were done incorrectly, then I'm concerned that there may be some others that are not tight enough. So to prevent this from happening in the future, I'm going to tighten them the way I would tighten them. And now that that's done, it should never have to be done again, as long as nobody cranks down on the motherboard screws excessively. So with that out of the way, we really don't need this case around here. I'm going to move it because it's a big distraction. I'm going to move it. Put it back here. There we go. I can breathe again. I have space to work. And just for giggles, we can put this up on the lazy Susan. All good. All good. Everybody with me? Y'all still with me? Nicholas says hello from Spain. Hey, Nicholas, thanks for watching. Shouldn't need the screwdriver for a little while, so we'll put that away. Now I want to grab a spare graphics card and a power supply. The wattage on the power supply really doesn't matter. I think if it's 450 watts or above, actually if it's 400 watts or above, it'll probably be good enough for our test. Even a high-end graphics card won't be drawing much power unless we're really pushing on it. So just to boot and everything, you'd be surprised how little power you actually need. I think most people are. And I just want to look back here in my office to see what I've got. What can I use? Do I have any open power supplies? No. Guess I'm going to open one. What are these? These are 450 watts. This'll do. There's been a shortage of power supplies on the market lately. There was a rush on buying parts, almost like you'd see during the month of December, which is not typical, and so the power supply industry wasn't expecting it and they weren't prepared for it. And when you combine that with the pandemic limiting shipping opportunities, they're still making and shipping, but they're not able to ship as much because there's not as much room on the cargo ships and the air freight as there was before the pandemic. So if everybody's just patient and holds off a month or two, hopefully things will return to normal. But everybody started buying all at the same time, and it created a spike in the marketplace that was not predictable, and they were not prepared for it. There's no other reason for the shortage. It's just supply and demand like any other time. So I was able to get some power supplies, thankfully, and these are some 450 watt power supplies, which are great for standard workstations, especially if you're not running on a separate graphics card. But even then, it would depend on which graphics card. Like I said, there's a lot of overestimating going on with power supplies, recommendations online. And I've got a great interview with a gentleman named George O, where we talk about why, or rather prove how much power is actually being used. I've also had a kilowatt device that measures power as it's being pulled from the wall, how much is being pulled. And it's pretty rare that we see that ever get drawn over 400 watts, even on some of the biggest, most high-end systems. However, if you're a power user, if you're somebody who really pushes the heck out of your system, that's a different scenario. But for most of us, even when we do push the system, it's just in moments. It's not over, the course of an hour where it's being pushed hard. And And these smaller power supplies are more than adequate for regular, what I would call regular computer use. That being said, I have no doubt that this 450 watt power supply will be enough for us to power the motherboard, CPU, RAM, and whatever graphics card I've got laying around. It should be fine. It should be more than we're going to pull from the wall. When you have an 800 horsepower car, you don't always drive it, pushing 800 horsepower. It's usually in moments of driving that you have brief moments where you might be pushing that much horsepower. It's rarely foot to the pedal to the metal for any length of time. But there's always somebody out there that will say, well, I do it. Good for you. You're not normal. You don't represent the way most people drive. So keep that in mind. There are no absolutes. There's no sort of nobody would ever. Sometimes that's what people hear when I talk about average computer usage. They hear absolutes. I'm talking about averages. I'm talking about majorities. There's always exceptions. And those people who are proud to be the exception are never people that would hire me. They are people that already know everything. So when you see that or hear that online from somebody, just remember the source, okay? Keep in mind the source. Is this somebody you've heard of before? Is this somebody who is famous? Or is this somebody who is a published author or respected in their field? Or is this just some rando online with a pseudonym? And as such, what they may be saying is true, or rather what they are saying may be true, but that doesn't mean it's any example of proving anybody wrong. Only a point of argument. Right? Somebody who wants to just say, I want you to know I'm different. It doesn't change the facts. Now, I've got power hooked up. I've plugged my power switch back in, and I'm going to grab a different graphics card than that. There's a box for you, Lyle. You don't want it? What's this? I got a graphics card up here. This is a EVGA GTX 550 Ti. Woo! Woo, feel the power. 550 Ti. That's what we're talking about right there. Frames per minute. That's how we measure this one. Not frames per second. Frames per minute. That's all right. It'll do the job. It'll do what I need it to do. And I don't have to worry about breaking it because it's worth about $4.50. Now, power. I probably have to give this some power. Yep, it's got a 6-pin power connector in the back. This is back in the day when they put power connectors in the back. Imagine, instead of putting it right up front where it's an eyesore. I need the keyboard and mouse dongle, which I set down over here. I had to remove it in order to separate the motherboard from the I/O shield. When you have anything USB plugged in, it'll often block the hole. I need to plug an HDMI adapter. Oh, I forgot this has micro HDI. I have an adapter for that somewhere. Micro HDMI adapter. Where is it? I've got this one, but it's angled. And of course, it's angled the wrong way. I think it'll work. And then I can plug my HDMI cable into there. Now, in theory, I should see the exact same behavior from this machine. It should power on, the fans should spin, and no post should occur. So let me plug power into the power supply. Always make sure the power supply switch is in the off position. We'll plug that in. Now we'll switch it to on, and now I'll hit the power connector here. Fans are all spinning. Graphics card fan is spinning. And we'll go over to my camera 2 position and see if we get a post. So I'm going to actually just turn off my camera 1 here for a moment. Hold on, you know what? That's a little disconcerting because you guys might think something's wrong with the video. So I'll keep myself right up there. Now, if we are seeing the same behavior after changing out the graphics card and after changing out the power supply, then we can assert fairly accurately that there's nothing wrong with the power supply or graphics card that were already in there, because we're seeing no change in the computer's behavior. So you've not yet isolated this issue. So by knowing that the power supply isn't an issue, that the video card is not an issue, then that really just leaves CPU, RAM, and motherboard. Now we've already moved the RAM around different sockets, and it has no result whatsoever. We've cleared the BIOS, so we don't have to worry about any setting in the BIOS causing this. And it's highly unlikely for a board to just die after it's been working, unless it's been toyed with in the BIOS, like it was overclocked too far, or if there was some, maybe you carried over an old power supply from a previous build, and maybe that power supply, I don't know, not in its best form. Maybe it's not delivering power cleanly. You don't know. You're just like, hey, the fan turns. I don't want to buy a new power supply, so I'll spend $900 on these new parts, and I won't spend $50 on a new power supply. And then you toast all your parts because your power supply was rickety and you didn't know it. Basically, what I'm saying is don't go cheap on your power supply when you're not going cheap on everything else. It's one of the few parts you really shouldn't carry over on a new build unless it's a modern 80+ rated power supply, in which case those are still new enough they're probably okay. And those are all built to a better standard anyway than the non-80+ versions. So right now, it's been on long enough for me to safely conclude that we have either a problem with the motherboard, the RAM, or the CPU. Now the customer says they've already changed the CPU and that it resulted in the exact same behavior. Nothing changed. So if that's true, if we take the customer's word for that for no other reason than to expedite the diagnostic, then what would be the next thing? Well, the next thing, I guess, would be for me to pull another motherboard out that would work with this customer's chip and RAM and move it all to a separate board and then see if that comes on. If that board powers on, then we have a bad motherboard here, and that's a pretty quick diagnostic. But you have to understand, if you're doing this at home, this can get to be a very expensive process. For you to buy another power supply or another graphics card to run through your diagnostics, it is fairly time consuming to have to purchase the parts, then perhaps return the parts when you find out they didn't make any difference. And it's times like this where you realize that just because it's possible for you to diagnose your own system, it may not be financially feasible, nor may it be very it may take a lot of time. It may not be quick, as you have to purchase parts and test them. And you could have basically built a whole new computer by the time you find the wrong part. Or you end up, just assuming it's a bad motherboard, sending it back, you get another motherboard back, and you're right back to square one again 2 weeks later after you waited for your new board to arrive. So there is a point where you say, this would probably be best, faster, cheaper, to bring it to a shop where they have all these parts, they can swap them out, and they can accurately diagnose the system much better than I can for less money, and they can do it quicker. Not every computer shop is like that, but if there's a good computer shop or a good computer tech near you, that's the process you're looking for. And then their rates don't seem so bad when you realize how much time and money it's going to save you to do it. So let me go back to my office. I know I have a few AMD boards back there that are brand new. This is feeling like a bad motherboard. If I had to guess, I'd say it's a bad motherboard. I think the customer's right. But let's take a look back here. What do I have that I can use for a testing system here? I've got to have something. Let's see. No, don't want to use that. What is this? I got a B450 down here. What is that, a 470? I was just looking to see if I had a full size. These are all micro ATX. Yeah. Looks like I only have one. The rest are all Intels. What a shock. So I've got a Gigabyte Aorus B450. It's the Aorus M gaming motherboard. It's brand new in a box. It's for an upcoming build, and we'll just use this to diagnose and verify what's going on. Let me just set this down here for a minute. Sometimes you can just kind of look at the board and see if there's anything obvious. You don't look for any burned marks or chips that look funny. Make sure everything looks seated correctly, that there's nothing obvious. I did double check the CMOS battery yesterday off camera, and it was fully charged. It wasn't bad. I don't know why I got the bad reading before, but when I checked the battery again off camera, the battery showed 100% of voltage. So I put his original battery back into the board. If the board's going back to the manufacturer anyway, that won't really matter much. There are some jumpers on this board, and I haven't verified the location of those jumpers. Sometimes if a customer moves a jumper on the board, it could prevent the board from booting. The customer made no mention of that to me. And I would have to look at the manual to find out what the default settings are. I'm going to assume that the customer didn't move anything as far as these little jumpers go. Physically, the board looks fine. I don't see anything that would draw my eye. I don't see leaking capacitors. I don't see burned components, specifically right around the CPU, the VRMs. They all look healthy. It looks like a perfectly good functioning board. Whatever's going on with it is quite the puzzle, but not every problem will have a visual component to it without testing equipment in a magnifying glass or a microscope. Marx Brothers 715 contributed $14.99. He says, "Hey Carey, great videos always. Have a Coke on me." Thank you, Marx Brothers. Marty sends $5. That's from Marty OL. He says, "Good day, Carey and chat." Hey Marty, good to see ya. John Yasuda, good friend of the channel here, has contributed $20. He says, "Have some Coke and pretzels on me." Great job so far. Thank you, John. Mike Yazzie with a $20 contribution. And once again, thank you, Mike. Thanks to all of you for supporting the stream, supporting the channel. And yeah, I gotta take this apart now. I've gotta pull this heatsink off. We're gonna pull the graphics card off. Once again, I wanna pull power from the power supply. I don't wanna work on a system that has power plugged in. I don't care if the power switch is on or off. I want it unplugged. And then I don't have to worry about faulty switches and electrocution or even small voltage shocks. I just prefer not being shocked. I'm a little weird that way. I prefer the electricity stays in the motherboard, and I don't like the way electricity feels. I am not a fan of that. So I always perform safety first when it comes to electricity, especially when it involves my discomfort. Now, I guess I can remove the power switch, and I got to remove the RAM. And of course, it's a lot easier for you to see what I'm doing with the system out like this. That's another benefit of pulling it out of the case when we're trying to show people and teach people online. I'm a visual person myself. I'm really somebody that has to get my hands into something to really understand it, but second to that would be watching it, seeing it being done. That's always more beneficial to me. The communication is better understood through seeing than through hearing. So I like to do it the way I wish it were done if I were watching. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove the heatsink now. There's no particular order to which screw or how you should turn the screws when you're taking the heatsink off. That only applies when you're putting the heatsink on, as we talked about yesterday. I'll just set this over here for now. And I'm not worried about thermal compound and stuff like that because we're still in the testing phase. So as long as there's thermal compound on there, I won't wipe it off, but I will reuse it. And I will not reapply it until I am done with my diagnostic and I'm ready to put everything back for final assembly. Before final assembly, I will clear all of the current thermal material off the contact points, make sure it's nice and clean, and reapply it properly. And that will be the last time I do it. Right now, doing it's kind of pointless because we're going to be taking it out and putting it back in several times. I also want to remove the USB dongle for the keyboard and mouse. I'm going to need that. You'll notice I'm trying to keep everything clear of the RAM. The RAM is one of the most static, it is the most static sensitive component of your whole build. So if there's anywhere that you want to be concerned about electrostatic discharge, it's certainly with your RAM. And in a lot of cases like this, RAM is often the culprit. So if we end up moving this stuff to this other board, and this other board, if this board boots and this board doesn't, then in that case we have a bad board. If this board does not boot, then that means the RAM, the CPU, something we're plugging onto the board is causing it. RAM, CPU, power supply, or graphics card. Now because we're using a different power supply and a different graphics card, it's unlikely we're going to have two bad power supplies or two bad graphics cards that cause the exact same symptom. It's not that unlikely to have two bad power supplies, but it is very unlikely that they would be both bad in the same leaving the same symptoms. It's highly improbable. So if this board doesn't boot, then we're looking at a bad CPU or bad RAM, in which case, if it were bad RAM, I could have solved this a lot faster and didn't have to go through all this effort. But hindsight is always 20/20. And I suspect this board over here is probably, it's either bad or, like I said, it's possible maybe there's a jumper missing or in a wrong position. I don't know. It's really strange. It doesn't happen very often. As I mentioned, this board is being used in an upcoming build. This build is just a project for the channel. It's not going to a customer. However, when it's said and done, I don't know if it'll be going to a customer. I don't know if it'll be going to a friend of mine or if I'll offer it for sale. But either way, it doesn't belong to anybody right now. It's mine. And I want to take these. I won't be using these plastic standoffs anyway, or these, not standoffs, but the heatsink, can't think of what they're called. Take these off of here. And we'll set them aside. I will probably put them back before I'm done because I want to say I'm not using an OEM fan on the build for this, but I can't remember if I am or not. So I'll put this back the way I found it when I'm done. Take out the chip. I want to get my glasses so I can take a look at the pins on the bottom of the chip. I want to make sure that they're all straight, that nothing underneath the chip looks unusual or is a cause for concern. I don't just want to assume. So I'll take a quick inspection of the bottom of the chip and we'll make sure all of those pins are straight, that nothing is missing. And it looks good to me. looks good. So we'll move that over here. Lock that down. And we can put the heatsink back on, which means putting these little plastic spacers on first. And you can see this is a pretty quick process. It doesn't take very much time to pull the motherboard out, rip it apart, put all the parts onto a new motherboard. It does sometimes feel a bit overwhelming when you think to yourself, oh, I have to pull the board out and check it and put another one in, but the reality is it honestly doesn't take very much time at all. So with that, I'm going to trade places so you guys can see better. We've got the CPU in there now with the brackets for the Mugen 5 installed. And I'm just going to trade places. We're going to move this board over here. And we'll put this board over here. I can slap the Mugen on there real quick. You guys get a good view of that, since before when I did it you couldn't see. Remember, the screw that sticks out is going to go towards the RAM sockets. Again, we're leaving all the thermal material on there because we're still testing. This will not be a, if the machine boots, it's not going to be a permanent solution, so it still has to come off and be put back on. And once I know what the solution is, as I mentioned, once I know for a fact I'm putting the cooler on for the last time, that's when I will clean the old thermal material off and reapply it properly. It's kind of pointless to do this during testing because we may be doing all of this for nothing if, say, for example, we find out there's bad RAM that's causing this and I just didn't catch it the first time. There's something weird in this USB 3.0 port. There's like some piece of plastic or something in there. It's a brand new board. I don't know why there would be any sort of, I don't know what that is in there. You guys see that? Brand new board. If you look down here on this USB port, there's something inside of it. See that red or pink right by my finger? It's in the plug. I don't know what that is. It wasn't packed with anything that color. It appears to be some sort of little piece of plastic, like a plastic bag, a little piece of plastic material. So keep your eye out for stuff like that when you're building, because you don't want anything like that to short something out. And then you wonder what you did wrong when you may have done nothing wrong. It may have just come out of the box that way. So you got to keep a sharp eye. Electronics, the electricity needs a clear path to flow, and if the path is interrupted by something like something shorting it out, it will definitely impact the performance or reliability of the computer. Doesn't belong there. So we'll put the heatsink back, or I mean the fan back on the heatsink, and we'll give it power. We'll just open up 2 sockets. That's all we should need. Any 2 should be fine. I am kind of curious which one is DIMM 1 on this. Usually Gigabyte likes to use DIMM 1 and DIMM 2 first. And it wouldn't hurt for me to acknowledge the proper sockets for this. Usually it's written on the board. It's certainly going to be in the manual as well. There it is. So 1 is the one closest to me. And then 3, and then 2, and then 4. So we want to use 1 and 3. I'll install the one closest to the CPU. And the reason I'm doing that is if I put the one up front first, it kind of makes it hard to work between the installed RAM and the heatsink. So in order to not paint myself into a corner, I'll work from the inside out. It also helps you guys to see what I'm doing. So that's DIMM sockets 1 and 2 that we've installed into. We've got CPU, we've got RAM. I need to give it some power. So we'll drag the power supply over here. We've got that's graphics card power. This is 8-pin CPU power that goes over here in this corner. Like that. And we'll plug in the big 24-pin motherboard power connector here on this side. And remember, because this CPU does not have built-in graphics, we have to plug in a graphics card. And I'm going to use the customer's graphics card, since I've already tested my own and it didn't make a difference. Once again, we're going to go to the topmost PCI slot, and I've got to pull it to the edge of the board so it can seat. This motherboard's so small that the little plastic retention levers that opened the RAM, I had the one closest to the CPU, that retention lever was open, and the video card was sitting right on it. And if I had pushed hard on it, I would have broken that little retention lever. So when things don't fit easily, don't force them. I can't emphasize that enough. Chances are there's something you need to move, and brute force is not the way to handle that. So now I've given the graphics card power, motherboard's got power, I've hooked up the power switch right here. Now I can plug the power supply in from the wall. I can take the power, make sure the power supply is in the off position, plug that in, hit the switch to the on position, and then I'm going to step over here. We're going to go back to camera 2 once more, and I will put myself in the corner again. So bear with me for a second while I configure the OBS software. And here we go. You ready? Fans are turning, fan is turning, fan is turning. Again, we want to wait 60 to 90 seconds on the very first boot. Hopefully it sees this Ryzen 7 okay. Well, I guess I don't have to say hopefully. It just determines how long the diagnostic's going to be. We're going to find it one way or another. I did not plug the HDMI cable into the graphics card. If you were catching me, you caught me. I'm not going to get a video signal without a video cable. So while it's running, I can plug this in. You don't have to shut the machine off. And it may not have initialized that port. So now I'm going to shut the machine off. And I want to make sure that I didn't unseat this at all. Make sure that my plug is all the way in. And we're going to try this just one more time. You can see the fans are spinning again. And hopefully we're going to see a power on self-test here. So that confirms the customer's RAM is good. That confirms the customer's CPU is good. And I didn't plug a keyboard or mouse in either, did I? I was in such a hurry, I kind of pushed through this a little too quickly. So I want to shut it off one more time. I'll grab my USB dongle, plug that in for the keyboard and mouse. Let me move the keyboard and mouse so I can reach them, which I'm sure is only going to confuse me when I grab the wrong one. Let's try this for the third time. We know it's going to boot. There's no mystery. I just want to look into the BIOS here real quick and make sure that it recognizes the proper CPU. BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure. Okay. Now, my video is kind of covering up some critical information, so let me remove my picture here for a moment. And let's go back over to what that said right over here. There's our CPU. It doesn't really tell me the make and model. Just give me voltage. We'll go to System, BIOS. That's all right. We'll just hit save and exit and let it reboot again. It should come up with no errors except there's no bootable device. We'll just wait a moment. We should see it post here in just a moment. There it goes. And right back into the BIOS because there is no bootable device. It goes into the BIOS. That's it's a very common behavior and it is as it should be. Let me go ahead and turn that one off and we'll go back full screen on camera 1. So the customer was on the right track. The customer felt like they had a bad motherboard. You'll see these fans stop spinning even though the system is still powered. I've not turned it off. It's still powered on. These fans stop spinning because the graphics card is just sitting at the BIOS. It's not working. It's not generating any heat. And in the old days, the fans would just always run. Nowadays, fans only run when they need to run. So you can see the CPU fan is still turning. We're still powered on. But the graphics card is saying, hey, I don't need these fans to run. I'm not running hot. So we'll turn them on when we need them. This is normal behavior. I'm going to go ahead and hit the power button, and I should see the CPU fan stop. I should see this little red light go off down here. And remember, the other motherboard wasn't shutting off when I pressed the button. I had to hold the button in for the motherboard to turn off. Now, these are the same 2 RAM modules I had used on the other motherboard. This is the customer's graphics card, the customer's CPU, the customer's RAM. All we've effectively done is change the motherboard and the power supply. And you'll see the system boots like it should. So there is something wrong with the customer's motherboard. As I mentioned, there is a jumper here, right here. And I'm not sure that that's where it's supposed to be. And then there's another jumper up in the top corner. And I'm not sure that that one is where it's supposed to be. So I'd have to look, because apart from those 2 jumpers potentially being in the wrong spot, there's no other reason why this should not boot up. Now you'll notice there's no cover that has to be placed over the CPU socket to send this back for RMA because AMD chips still use the pins are on the chip. The pins are not in the socket. So to send this back for RMA, we would send it back just like this. If there were any M.2 drives installed, we'd need to remove those. The motherboard manufacturer just wants the board back. They don't need the box it came in. They don't need any of the packing material. They do want it to be in an anti-static bag. They want you to remove your CPU, remove your RAM, remove your storage devices, and send it back the way that you got it, basically. But they don't need the documentation or the SATA cables or anything other than the bad part itself in a static bag or an anti-static bag. And then you pack that up with 2 inches of packing material all the way around it in any box at all. Manufacturers never require the original box. So don't think that for some reason you have to hold on to any original boxes. I've never heard of such a thing. If anybody does require that, they must be new. And I'm sure a call to the Federal Trade Commission will solve that problem. In the meantime, I will go online and check out what the warranty is on this board based on its serial number, which is all the information I need to check warranty. Pretty easy. I would go to Gigabyte. I would search Google and I would type in Gigabyte motherboard warranty RMA, and probably the first link that appears will lead me to where I need to go to. There's probably some online warranty status checker where I can type in the serial number. Gigabyte will ask all kinds of irrelevant questions when you're asking for a return merchandise authorization number. They need to determine it. You don't get to determine it. So they want to know, what RAM are you using? What CPU are you using? What OS did you install? You have to go through all this nonsense, and I always put all that information in. I don't go too... I only give them the bare minimum of what they're asking, and then I explain to them that there's usually a notes section, and I say the board won't post. I move my RAM and my CPU to another board and it works, and that's how I've determined I've got a bad board. Usually technical support won't ask you to do anything because they've realized you've already solved the problem, and it makes sense that if you've moved the parts to another board and the board works, here's your RMA number, you've got a bad board. And it takes Gigabyte about 2 to 3 days to return any emails for RMA requests or support requests in general. So it starts as a support request for an RMA number. Once the RMA number is issued, they will give you packing and shipping instructions along with an RMA number that typically has to be written on the outside of the box, as well as included with a piece of paper inside the box. They may ask for a copy of the sales receipt. I will reach out to the customer and verify with them that they want to stick with this board and they want to go through the RMA process. It'll be faster if we order a new motherboard. We'll have it here in a couple days, but it'll be, $150. We can send this board back. The shipping will probably be about $15, and within 10 to 14 days, we'll have a new board. Because I work as a computer technician, the length of time that this takes to repair, because it's not a customer of mine under warranty, there's no clock ticking as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sitting here twiddling my thumbs looking for something to do. Once I process this and ship the board, I'm immediately on to the next system. I'm all about fixing as many computers as possible, and getting down to an oscilloscope and trying to figure out which of these chips is bad and what's going on would take far too much of my time, and I would lose so much money in lost work. That's just not a practical way to run a business in the United States. So it's really up to whatever hurry the customer's in. Obviously, if they're in a bigger hurry, we'll buy a board. If they want to save money and wait a little longer, we'll RMA the board. I do believe the board has a 3-year warranty, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I'll find that out when I put the serial number information online at Gigabyte. And that's your diagnostic, and that's how we got to a bad motherboard. It was relatively quick. Once we got the board out of the case, you can see it's just a lot easier to see everything and to work around any angle of the board without the case being in the way or cable management getting in the way, or the lack thereof, as the case may be. A couple other contributions came in. Bro Feets contributed $2. Hey, thank you, Bro Feets. Samuel Ramos with a $20 contribution. Thank you, Samuel. He says, good to see you, Carey. Looking forward to seeing you solve this computer problem. Yeah, you and me both. Nunman 1962 with a $50 contribution. Very nice. He says, a little something to help pay for the medical bills incurred from lifting the Buick Skylark the other day. Oh, wait, that was a PC case. I got a hernia from watching you lift that thing, Carey. It kind of hurt me a little bit. Paul Ware contributed $5. George Regaldo with a $20 contribution. Thank you. Bro Feets again with another $2, and Mira Ora with a $5 contribution, asking if I tried turning it off and back on. Because that's tech support script line 1. You are correct. Thanks you guys so much. Thank you, Nunman and Samuel Ramos and George. Thank you guys so much for those generous contributions. And to everybody else with your contributions, again, it all adds up, and I appreciate any and all support. So thank you for that. Matt says, sell him the new board. Well, it's currently an option if he wants a smaller board. His board had Wi-Fi on it, and that might be important to him. He might want another board with Wi-Fi. And that does tend to add about $30 on average to the cost of the board. We could add Wi-Fi to this board, but he's going to lose a PCI slot, although this board has 3 of them. So one will be used by the graphics card, one will be used by the Wi-Fi card, assuming he wants the Wi-Fi. So really don't know this person that sent this in at all. We haven't even spoke on the phone, and it's going to be time for that phone call now that I have some definitive information and I know how to move forward now, confidently. Jeff says, it's good that you had that motherboard for testing. Absolutely, Jeff. This is what a A real computer repair shop should have every component needed in an AMD or an Intel computer that's required for testing. That means they will have spare power supplies, spare RAM, spare CPUs, and spare motherboards. That's just bottom line, okay? It doesn't have to be the high-end stuff. It can be something low-end. You should have, as a repair shop, just a socket AM4 motherboard laying around. Doesn't even matter what chipset, honestly. Just make sure it's socket AM4. And a shop would always be sure it's got the latest BIOS, so it'll read all these chips. Socket 1151 on the Intel side. Now, I don't really fix Threadripper or X299 systems, so I don't have spare X299 and X399 motherboards, nor do I want any. So in those particular cases, the diagnostic process would require a little more faith, or I would have to determine whether it's worth my investment to buy a part for testing those systems. They're always a pain in my butt, and I pretty much always see bad motherboards on X299 anyway. I can almost guarantee if an X299 comes in and it's not the RAM, it's probably the motherboard. Very, very common. Same with X99. So I would just operate that on faith. With Threadripper, I haven't had any Threadrippers in for repair. Whatever that means. Does that mean they're more reliable, or does it mean those people fix them themselves? I don't know. But I also haven't built any Threadrippers for customers. I've only built one Threadripper, and that was for this channel as a community project, which my sister has been using for editing, and she says it's acting up on her now, and she's ready to throw it out the window. So looks like old Thready found love and screwed it up. So Threadripper continues to maintain its finicky diva nature, as I explained, and why I don't like working with those systems. They take far too much of my time. I know that Anthony Remus was building 10 Threadripper systems for one of his clients. I'd be very curious to follow up with Anthony in the next year and find out if he was issuing more support for those or less support compared to the regular systems that he does. I suspect he's going to have more support requirements on those Threadrippers, and I want to know if I'm right or wrong. So time always tells the truth, and Anthony's only just now built them. So we'll see how, I don't know when to expect there to be problems, but after a year, we should have a pretty good idea of how many of those systems required support, how often, and whether or not he'd do that again. For all I know, they could be the most reliable systems he's ever built. So I think it's important to get that second opinion from somebody who runs their own shop. And based on my experience, he's going to say, yeah, those things were a nightmare and I'll never do it again. So we might have to pull this video in a year from now when I talk to Anthony and say, hey, Anthony, remember those Threadrippers you built a year ago? How did that work out? Frankie B has contributed $10. Hey, thank you, Frankie B. Guy Sternitsky has contributed $5. He says, awesome job, Carey. Your shows have helped me more than you know. Right on, Guy. Thank you. Michael Dane with another contribution, $10 this time. He says, good work, Carey. Thanks, Michael. South Bay Technology Gurus with a $2 contribution. And thank you to South Bay Technology Gurus. Exotic PC, was it Exotic PC? It sent in a $100 PayPal contribution earlier today. My thanks to the folks over at Exotic PC. I don't know their name. It's just a Proton Mail email address, so it's all very anonymous. But thank you for supporting the channel, all of you. Zero Core says, yet another great show. Thank you. Don Mildes says, good morning from Sydney, Australia. Good morning, Don. Andrew wants to know how the dogs are doing. You tell me. I have a hairy lump on my floor. Lyle. Yeah, I'm talking to you, boy. You giving me the side eye? Oh, there goes Jimmy. There they are. See, we woke them up. They were all quiet. Look what you guys did. What's up? What's up, boy? You got to tilt your head? Oh, stretch it out. Stretch it out. Attaboy. All right. It is not dinner time yet. You're half an hour early. As you were, go back to sleep. Go back to guarding the house. That's what you call that. Good boys. You're good boys. Lyle goes right to the cookie jar. What a shock. All right, let me just bring this up a little. Let's tilt this up. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'll take your questions now since we got to the solution where I have to stop. I can't go any further without some direction from the customer. So since we have some time, I'm happy to answer any. I'll do my best to answer any questions you've got. Rain One Full has contributed $2 Canadian. He says, I love this community. Thanks for making me blue. Right on. Well, thanks for being a part of the community. We certainly need more people like you. Rochester NY87 has contributed $5. He says, I've got a Threadripper 2990WX and a 1950X, and I can't stand them. I'm switching to an Intel 10900K or 9900K. I refuse to build Threadripper here for customers. See, so it's not just me. Robert Fontaine has contributed $2. He says, you are the best and most genuine YouTube channel in existence. Thank you. That's very kind. I try to be. You know, what I try to do and what I do may be two different things. But I do try. So thank you. Ryan Farmer is back with another generous contribution, 100 pounds. He says, good evening. Thank you, Ryan. Very generous. And Christopher Donkers has contributed $10. He says, I love your very informative videos, Carey. Well, thank you, Christopher. Again, I appreciate all your support. I'm out here just trying to show you a day in the life of a tech. And I quite often get a lot of people telling me how I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing. And this is a great counter to that, that there are people that appreciate and value what I do. The fact is, I've been doing it long before the internet existed. And it's quite shocking to have complete strangers attack me when I've not said anything about them. You know what I mean? I'm not attacking them. I'm not causing any harm. I don't know why people behave like that. So when people show their support with their contributions and their kind words, it is a great antidote to the psychological terrorism that people seem to enjoy online. So thank you for that. Jean Tem contributed $5. He says, I installed the Windows Debloater app from GitHub, and I really like it. I wish I'd have known about it a long time ago. Hey, I didn't even know about it until I posted the video where I removed certain apps, and I mentioned there were some apps I couldn't remove. And several commenters said, you got to use the Windows 10 Debloater from GitHub. And it was only because so many people mentioned. If it was just one person, I probably would have rolled my eyes at it. But because so many different people had mentioned it, I said, yeah, I better take a look at this. And, you know, look, it's not perfect like anything else. And I'm still sort of early in on my testing. But the end results so far haven't had any negative consequences that I'm aware of. So, you know, it's GitHub, which in and of itself is a reputable site for open source software development. So in theory, it shouldn't be harmful. And it should be very well tested. But the key word is should. Okay, what it is and what it should be don't always align. But, you know, it's not a big corporation looking to, you know, say, well, we'll remove some of your programs, but if you pay a little money, we'll remove the rest of it kind of stuff. So it's open source, transparent, and genuine, as I try to be here as well. So they certainly deserve the attention. Projects like that deserve the attention more than the big corporations that can pay for their own attention. William Dawson said he found out that not all M.2 slots are equal. It depends on the chip you're using. There's only so many lanes of traffic based on the chipset of your motherboard. And when you bought your motherboard, you could have purchased one where the M.2 slots were equal, but it would have cost you more money. And if you wanted another M.2, like if you wanted 3 and you wanted them all to be able to run full speed, you'd have to move to X299 or Threadripper to get the full bandwidth required for that to happen. And that's all part of the chipset, and it's part of what you pay for. The cheaper motherboards, like that the H370 board, that's going to have one slot that runs at full speed and another slot down below that runs at half speed. It's a $99 board. So that's all part of what you're deciding when you pick your chipset. Would I do a video with Tom from Tom's Hardware? I'd love to, but never been offered that opportunity. I've published for Tom's Hardware in the past. I've got some articles up on Tom's Hardware from many years ago. It was sort of a bucket list item. I didn't want to work for Tom's Hardware. I just wanted to be published on Tom's Hardware. And I wrote 2 articles for Tom's Hardware and said, okay, bucket list check, move on to the next thing. I always respected and still respect Tom's Hardware as a genuine source of information, accurate technical information, and I wanted to be associated with that. I wanted to be good enough. Being accepted by Tom's Hardware was a vindication that an expert publishing, technical publishing site had verified what I had written as technically accurate and at or above their minimum level of accepted technical knowledge, to be able to write for them. And so this was a while back, and it was a wonderful feeling to be good enough. That's why I didn't want to work for them. I just wanted to prove to myself that I had the technical chops, the writing chops, and the ability to explain it in non-technical terms that Tom's Hardware would say, this is good enough for us to publish. And that's what I achieved, and so I never wrote for them again after that because there was nothing left to prove, you know what I mean? But that meant a lot to me. Again, if you have any technical questions for me in the chat room, I'll do my best to answer them. If you've already asked prior, I didn't see it, please ask your question again. James wants to know if the Sabrent Rocket 4 terabyte M.2 is in use yet, and if so, anything worth sharing. Yes, James. I pulled out the 2 terabyte Intel 660p and then the 2 1 terabyte, I think they're Team 3.5-inch SSDs, and replaced, copied everything over to the 1 4 terabyte drive. The one thing I noticed is when I restart the computer now, I never get the little circle. Like the BIOS initializes, it looks like that little circle is about to start, and then bam, my desktop is up. I'm like, geez, okay, that's a difference. As for everything else, right now, I'm not really noticing much performance difference. Outlook and email and browsing the web all feels the same as you would expect. And it's just nice to have everything on one drive instead of spread across 3. That's about all I have to report at this time. I had to uninstall Intel's, I have the Intel driver updater, and it was wanting me to update the Intel SSD toolbox, and I went, why do I still have that installed? So I uninstalled that, and while I was in the uninstall area in Windows, I also had the Intel NVMe driver, which doesn't do me any good without an Intel NVMe drive. I uninstalled that, and of course you have to reboot for those changes to take effect. They weren't hurting anything by having them there, but they weren't doing anything but consuming resources unnecessarily, so I took them out. Now, the folks over at Sabrent do have a solid-state drive toolbox. It looks like it's in beta, and it provides information about the drive, but there's no, rapid mode like Samsung. There's no, there is a firmware update option, but there is no available firmware for the drive that's been updated yet. I suppose if there was, that's how they would apply it. But no news is good news. It's working as expected. Thank you for asking. Hugh Wong has contributed $2. He says, I just got home and took a shower, and I'm glad to see you're still here. Thank you. Aziz Rahan has contributed 10 Canadian dollars. Hey, thank you, Aziz. Scott Hallinan says, I noticed with Windows 10 version 2004 that it doesn't let you log in until you have a password. I don't know what you're talking about. The streamer has 2004. It boots right to the desktop. So that has nothing to do with Windows. That's just a configuration option that you'll need to change. Let's see what else we have. Ben Fitzpatrick says, I'm on a Ryzen 5 1600. It's still working fine. However, it's rather old. Should I upgrade it or no? My birthday is July 16th, and I'm considering upgrading. Ben, that's really an individual decision. If your computer meets your needs, Doesn't sound like an upgrade is necessary. On the other hand, if you just feel like upgrading and you feel like you want to, even if there's no real benefit other than the joy of doing the upgrade, then go for it. And if you've got the money burning a hole in your pocket, it's a couple $100. You'll be able to possibly just swap out the CPU, or you may have to change your motherboard, but everything else should carry over without any problem. So that's a decision only you can make. I think whether you decide to upgrade or to not upgrade, in either way, you've made the right decision. What are my top 5 diagnostic programs? My brain, my brain, my brain, my brain, and MemTest 86. That's it. Have I ever made a video of a remote diagnosis? Remote diagnostic is almost impossible. You can do remote virus removal or remote, hey, my printer doesn't work or I can't access a drive on the network. But as for any actual PC repairs, it's almost impossible to do remotely because there may be things going on physically that you will have to see. And if it's a machine I've never seen before, I won't work on it remotely because of the liability involved. If you've got a failing hard drive that's clicking and clacking and I can't hear it, you're like, oh, my computer's running slow, could you take a look at it? I start jamming on that hard drive and I kill it. That system's done for. Times like that should have been at a technician where they could have said, hey, this hard drive is making a lot of noise. Let's copy the data off of it right now if you don't have a backup. We need to be very cautious because this thing's going to die any second. I can't hear that when I'm remote, and so I could hammer on that drive and just completely kill it, requiring professional data recovery if there's no backup. I don't want to take on that liability. Also, if there's no fans running or the fans are running loud, I can't hear it and I can't see it. So if I've never seen it before in my life, and it's just some stranger saying, hey, can you log in remotely and look at my machine? No, I cannot. There's too much liability there. It's irresponsible. Carey, any word on the 2004 build being good or bad? Vern, I made a video on this. There's always a very tiny percentage of people that are affected with issues with any update. But they're very loud people. They would have you believe that it's common. I've installed the 2004 update on about 8 computers so far, including when I was in California with a family member's all-in-one Dell. It just works. I don't know what else to tell you. Don't let that little tiny bit of people that are having problems convince you that they're normal. They're not normal people. They don't have normal situations. And this idea that they assume because they're having a problem, everybody else will have one, shows you just how not normal they are. These people that are posting and warning people, these are not normal people. I'm just telling you, they're not normal. The vast majority of people are going to install the 2004 update without any issue. I will tell you, on the family member's computer, a computer I had never seen in person, I made sure to run the Dell update software to ensure the latest drivers and BIOS were installed. There was a Wi-Fi driver update, even though the Wi-Fi was working fine. And I knew I was going to put the update on, and there's probably a reason, there's going to put the Windows 10 update on. And there's probably a reason these drivers are updated. You want to make sure you got the latest video card driver. Make sure you got the latest Wi-Fi and Bluetooth drivers. Make sure that you do a scan for malware. And make sure to uninstall any programs. This computer had a VAST. I took a VAST off of it. Then I installed the Windows 10 2004 update. And it installed without any problem, although it did not auto-connect back to the Wi-Fi. There was no problem with the Wi-Fi. I simply had to click on the icon in the system tray, click on the network name, the SSID. The password was still remembered and it reconnected. I don't know why that happened. It was no big deal. And it works great to this day, as I would expect it would. I didn't hesitate to install that Windows 10 2004. I will tell you that I did have an Acronis image because I was on a limited time schedule, and I did have an Acronis image of the drive. So if it had all gone sideways, I could have restored it back to the way it was. because I was only in California in that part with that family for 2 days. So there wasn't a lot of time to get everything prepped and ready, and they only have a 4 megabytes down internet connection. So downloading the Windows 10 update took over an hour. However, it all installed without a hitch, and everything works great. And I have yet to see the 2004 update fail. So again, I want to remind you that all those people warning you, oh, I had this problem and I had that problem, those are not normal. They do not represent the majority of people. So because a few of the minority are screaming loudly, don't let that noise confuse you or conflate you with a large group of people making noise. But do what you want to do. I don't profit and I don't lose money whether or not you choose to upgrade to Windows 10 2004. Honestly, don't care. All my customers are getting Windows 10 2004. And if it ever fails on me, I will let you know. I have no reason to not disclose that information. I'm more than happy to share my experiences with you, be they good or bad. But when I continually have good experiences and people contradict me, say, well, I don't know anything about you and your system and what you did to it, but I have a feeling that if your system was in my hands and I did it, it probably would have been okay. Probably. Now, I realize there will always be some exceptions. I know there are some Microsoft Surfaces that have some issues. PC World magazine had mentioned that they had a couple of Microsoft Surface books and that the update went fine on most of them, but on 2 or 3 of them they had a problem, and they don't know why. It doesn't make any sense that they were the same. Apparently they were the same, and Microsoft acknowledges that they have an issue that they know about with one of the models of Surface books, I guess. But again, it's rare. It's very, very rare. There's always going to be some reported problems. And just because Microsoft is looking into problems doesn't mean that you're likely to experience those problems. It means that enough people have experienced them for Microsoft to say, okay, let's address it. But if it's affecting, let me put it to you this way. Here's a real simple way to answer your question. When Microsoft pulls the update, when they retract it, then you know the truth. But as long as that update's available to download right now, there's nothing wrong with it. There is an accepted minimal number of collateral of idiots, mostly idiots, who blame Microsoft for their problems. It's mostly just idiots. And then of those people reporting, the vast majority are idiots, and then there's this little percentage that are innocent victims that just have, some driver from a manufacturer that didn't update, or they've got a piece of hardware with a BIOS that's not quite right. It's not their fault. But again, that's going to happen on any update. There's not a single update ever released in history where 100% of the people downloaded it without issue. Because there's some weird people out there that do weird things, and they're always going to blame Microsoft. They will never blame themselves. Never, ever do they do anything wrong. Don't let those people manipulate the facts that are right before you. If that update is still available to download, there's a reason for that. I thought it was pretty funny. Someone mentioned, well, a corporation would never download it on the first day. Well, a corporation wouldn't be coming to YouTube to determine whether or not they should download it. Corporations have policies and procedures that have to be followed, regardless of what any YouTuber says. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, if it's not good enough for a corporation, please, corporations have policies, protocols, and procedures in place. They're not looking on YouTube for your advice. So to even talk about what a corporation does on a YouTube channel is just stupid. It's just really stupid. It's sort of blinding. Like, who is that information for? Who are you talking to? So you guys at home, you're all home users watching, or your small businesses, there's no reason you shouldn't update. And if you want to be cautious, use a program like Acronis. You can even use Windows built-in backup tool. Make an image of your system. That way, no matter what happens, you've got that safety net you can fall back on. But more than probably 97% of the people that download this and apply it will not have any issues. And that 3% that do, some of those will be valid issues, but the vast majority will be user-created or the fault of a software or driver manufacturer. And just bear that in mind. Try to be open-minded and try to understand the source of, the Chicken Little whose, acorn fell on his head and now the sky is falling. Now, when the source comes from someone reputable, if you got a guy like Ed Bott, who's a publisher for Microsoft Press, or you got a guy like, I don't know, there's a lot of reputable folks associated with Microsoft who's named Paul Thoreau. There's some names, Mary Jo, what's her name? When these people write stuff about Windows, it's probably true. It's a very good, reputable source. When some rando on the internet goes off and is warning you, it might as well just be a scammer. Might as well be somebody calling you saying you've got a virus. I wouldn't listen to them. Ultimately, you need to decide for yourself. You need to have your own experience. And if you want to come in here and share that with us, that's great, good or bad. But advising others not to do it because you had a bad experience, I don't know, it takes a special kind of person to do that. A couple other contributions have come in while I've been rambling. Hugh Wong I caught that one already. Thank you, Hugh. Some World has contributed $5. Said I could send you some marshmallow fluff, a New England treat, a peanut butter and fluff sandwich called a Fluffernutter. Lyle's original name was Fluffernutter because he looks like a Fluffernutter. He's kind of peanut butter colored, and his fur on his backside is all white like marshmallow fluff. Come on, look at him. He looks just like a... Wait a minute, where's my... I gotta get my camera back out. There's a Fluffernutter right there. Look at that Fluffernutter. See, he's got white. You can't see. And then Jimmy Cocoa Puff. My boys. Good boys. You're gonna come over here? You're just gonna stand by the cookie jar? You're just gonna give me some side eye? Am I getting some side eye? Yeah, I'm getting side eye. I see you. I see you. It's not dinner time yet. You got 10 minutes. Go bark at a tree or something. If you don't, I will. So I'll take a few more questions here. And no, please don't send me any of that marshmallow fluff. It's available at Walmart here if we wanted it. I don't have a sweet tooth. I don't like that stuff. It's too sweet. But thank you. That was nice of you to offer. Yeah, I really don't have any sweet tooth. So. Andrew says the dogs want a cookie. Well, it's too close to dinner. They'll have their dinner first, and when they're done with their dinner, that's the routine. So we're about 10 minutes from that, which means I've got about 10 minutes left to answer your questions. If you have any, please feel free to ask now. Carey, what do you think of Elon Musk's Starlink internet plan for worldwide coverage? I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. Bezos is doing one too. I think Musk is going to be first. It's going to get expensive, though. It's not going to be cheap. Does Lyle ever get haircuts? No. His fur is there to protect him, so we leave that alone. He gets groomed, and when they groom him, they'll take out his undercoat and stuff like that with a comb, but he doesn't get a haircut. Madi has contributed again, $5. Hey, Madi, thank you. How you were liking your system from Anthony Remus? What do you think of that, Madi? What's your experience so far? Johnny Jack Wind has contributed 17 New Zealand dollars. He says, I purchased your Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer and sent $10 through PayPal and thought I might as well send 10 through Super Chat. I may not chat very often, but I always support your channel. Thanks, Johnny Jack Wind. No, I do appreciate that. Thank you. Bill wants to know if I should ask the customer to buy and add the power supply shroud to deal with the airflow concern. I'm not really worried about the airflow concerns. I just think it's a stupid design on behalf of Be Quiet. In this case design, I just think it's dumb. I don't think the power supply shroud really matters. Nor do I think the heat is really going to be a problem. I was just pointing out that it would add heat to the case. I didn't say adding the heat to the case would be a problem. That may be what you heard, but that's not what I said. Jesper says, greetings from Denmark. Nice channel, Carey. Thank you, Jesper. Phoenix was supposed to be 110 degrees today. Yeah, it was 110 degrees today, I can assure you. It was very hot today. What time is it? It's 8 minutes to 5 in the afternoon. And how are we looking on our temp? Let's see what my phone says. My phone says it's 111. 111 degrees Fahrenheit is hot. It's oppressively hot. It's supposed to cool down this weekend, though, so we'll see. Darren Cluth with a $5 contribution. He says, why do you make so much sense all the time? Love you, man. Can I say that? You absolutely can. Thank you. Bryant says, did you get my other 2 PayPal donations? Bryant, I can't check any PayPal contributions because they come through my email, and all that's done in my back office. So when I'm live on YouTube, I can see the Super Chat contributions, but when I get PayPal contributions, I will always hit a reply and say thank you to that. It might take me a day or 2 because sometimes I get so busy with other stuff. If you've sent those contributions more than 24 hours ago, please let me know. It may be sometimes I don't get the notifications from PayPal, and I have to look through my PayPal summary to find it. But it's always important to me to acknowledge those and to say thanks. But if you just sent them today, I just haven't checked yet. What kind of phone do I use? That's a Samsung Galaxy S10. Viable Solutions wants to know if I thought about getting a Logitech Master Mouse. I've done a review on the Logitech mice that can be used for multiple systems. You can find that review here on the channel. Madi says it's too early to tell yet with regards to concluding whether or not he likes or has any issues or concerns with the system from Anthony Remus. It's a fair answer. Take your time, get to know it. Bob Shoemaker says it's 112 degrees right now. Yeah, okay, so you know when it's over 110, it almost doesn't even matter anymore. It could be 119, 122. Once it hits 110, it's just too hot. Carey, do you like jalapeno poppers chip? No, no. Marky says that's 30 degrees too hot for me. Agreed. Al Hedge wants to know what I think about the new 10-pin 12-volt only power plug. Never seen one. First I've heard of it. Alex wants to know what my opinions are on the Apple Macintosh as a PC tech. I don't really have any opinion on them. I don't work on them, so I don't know a thing about it, other than they're all using Intel parts right now. That's the way it's been for a few years. So in theory, it's the same as working on a PC that's extraordinarily restricted. But there are other YouTube channels available that have that content. That is not in my wheelhouse, so I have no opinion. Michael Dane says he's working on his 21st computer build for another family in need for schooling their kids. Right on, Michael. You are a true inspiration to others. You're such a generous person, and I know that feels good to give, you know, especially when the people that you're doing this for show appreciation for it. It can be very addictive to be so giving. And thank you for being so cool. Thomas has contributed $2. He says, do you have any advice on dog training? I do have a video here where I was showing how I was training Jimmy when he first came in. I thought it would be a good opportunity to explain that there are lots of different ways that you can train a dog. There's not just one way, but everybody that I've seen on YouTube that trains says, this is how you do it. It's one way. There's lots of other ways. I have my own technique, and I shared that. I think the video was like introducing my new assistant or something. And I do a follow-up where I said, here's what I'm going to do, and you can see how clueless the dog is when I'm asking the dog to do something. I show you my technique, and I say, I'm going to keep doing this a few times a day for the next couple of weeks, and I'll come back and make another video. We're going to repeat this, and his behavior and response will be different. And that's exactly what happened. Except I didn't do it every day. I got busy, so I did it like once every 4 days. And instead of taking 2 weeks, it took 4 weeks until I had time to make the video. And then we went out into the yard and we said, look, here's how he was 4 weeks ago. Here's how he is today. This is how we got from here to here. Take from that what you will. This is how I train. This is how I do it. It's the repetition and consistency. And it may not be the most expeditious way, but it's my way. There's probably faster ways to train an animal, but I go through consistency and repetition. And as long as you have the dog's attention, you know, if the dog is over looking around, you're never going to train that dog. You've got to get the dog to look you in the eyes, and then you need to repeat over and over again. Don't do it for more than 10 minutes or the dog, you're done. You know, the dog's out. So no more than 10 minutes, no more than twice a day, maybe once every day for 10 minutes or once every other day for 10 minutes. So it's not too hard on you, not too hard on the dog. Neither one of you are getting frustrated. Start with one little trick first. You know, I always start with give me your paw. And I always teach them if they want something, I always ask for their paw. So anytime they want anything, the first thing they do is they lift their paw. A lot of people think that's really cute. I take Lyle to the vet, and the vet's got a little dog cookie to ease the dog, and Lyle's just raising his paw up. She goes, oh, that's so cute. And I'm like, that's the deal. She's not seeing it the way the dog is seeing it. The dog is like, if I raise my paw, you give me the cookie. She's thinking the dog's offering to shake her hand like he's polite. That's not what's going on. But that's okay. You know what? That's okay. Because that ultimately shows that he's paying attention and that she has his interest and he's calm. He's not freaking out. But do know there are lots of different techniques for dog training, and they're probably all correct. There's not just one way. I guess that's the point. I was training dogs in the 1970s. There was no YouTube. You just sort of had to figure it out. And it comes down to just basics. And the basics are, again, repetition. Repetition and consistency. Don't change up what you're doing. Robert says, I remember the one you did on Lyle. No, that wasn't on Lyle. That was on Jimmy. Are Jimmy and Lyle rescue dogs? Yes. Yes, they are. Lyle was hours from being put down, and we had gotten into a big argument with the Maricopa County Animal Control folks because they were insisting that he was dog aggressive and he needed to be put down, and that even the independent child rescue group evaluated him as aggressive. And I said, well, did you evaluate him here in the facility? And they said, yes. You can't evaluate a dog's temperament in a dog jail. You got to get the dog away from the smells, the sounds. You've got to get that dog, because dogs' noses are very sensitive. You get that dog a mile away from there and then evaluate its temperament. Because the dog you're seeing, let me put it to you this way. You lock me up in a jail cell for 4 days and then check my temperament and see how social I am. You probably aren't going to get an accurate reading of who I truly am, but only of my behavior in that environment. Those dogs need to be pulled from their environment in order to genuinely evaluate their temperament. And I just knew from looking at Lyle, I can't explain it, but I've always had this weird connection, and I just know. And I just knew they were wrong. And I fought and argued with them. They relented and gave me the dog against their better judgment, and that was 8 or 9 years ago. They wanted him dead. And the fact that I wanted him, they still wanted him dead, which is weird. You'd think the people that work there want to see these dogs go to homes. They were dead set on putting him down that night. He was on the schedule. We follow our schedule. God forbid we take him off the schedule, because the whole world will end. Yeah, that was something. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful they went against their better judgment. They listened to me. And like I said, that was about 9 years ago. Have I found a comfy desk chair yet? No, wasn't looking for one. Dark Days Games DDG says, Amen, Carey. I spent a year in jail, and a dog in its cage all day can be easily institutionalized. Yeah, I mean, it's common sense. Patrick says, Lyle is so chill. Well, understand that we don't have kids running around here, you know? So, a couple of dogs living with a couple of old people. You're going to have quiet days. Not a whole lot of excitement happening around here. So day in and day out, it's kind of boring. So what you see as chill is probably a very bored dog, unfortunately. They do get very excited when nieces and nephews come over. The dogs are like, oh, there's kids with energy that want to play with us. Never leave. Take me with you. These old people are boring. In the video I have on Lyle, there's a video I've got here on YouTube called What Kind of Dog is Lyle? Because I got that question a lot. I still get it. There's original footage of him in the pound that I shot with my camera phone, with my camera. Not with my phone, with my camera back then. And you'll see him in the cage, locked up at the pound, just the way we saw him. In his little doggy jail. I do also want to mention, I see there's more talk on the Windows 10 2004 update. I did mention in that video that I did not encourage people to force the update, but also not to deny the update if it's offered. And several people heard what they wanted to hear and suggested that I was recommending people force the update. I think if you go back and listen to what I actually said, I said, you shouldn't force the update, but I know you're going to do it anyway, so I'm going to show you how to do it the right way. That's what I said, more or less. It may have been word for word, now that I think about it. And for whatever reason, people leaving comments decided they wanted to argue with me, and they thought my advice was bad, when my advice was don't force it. But if you're going to force it, here's the proper way to do it. Here's how I would do it. And then I did it live on camera with no rehearsal, no practice, and no idea what was going to happen next. And it worked. And yet people just ignore that because it doesn't fit their agenda. It's very interesting psychology happening on the internet. Just deny the reality that is in front of you and suggest that it's somehow false or wrong, even though you witnessed it live and unrehearsed and it succeeded, just like I told you it would. What are you going to do? There are just people that want to fight for their own limits. When people want to fight for their own limits, I mean, what can I say to them? That's their own problem, and it's something they're going to have to deal with. I'm not their psychologist, I'm not their psychiatrist, but to me, it saddens me that people fight for ignorance. They want to fight to defend ignorance and limits. Let's hope that they eventually become enlightened through whatever path they need to take. I'd hate the idea of someone living their whole life with such blinders on. But, maybe that's what they want. Whew, sounds a horrible existence to me. Mike Yazzie says, I heard you loud and clear, Carey, on the update. Thanks, Mike. You know, the people that hear me, I guess, aren't the ones leaving the comments. Clearly, they heard what they wanted to hear, or maybe they didn't even watch the video at all. But that doesn't stop them from making sure I hear them. So it's kind of a double standard. All right, we are a little after 5 o'clock, so I guess I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for watching, and thanks for all the kind generosity. And again, you know, well, I kind of focus probably a little too much on the people that are trying to assert some sort of psychological terrorism here. I do want you to know that the vast majority of viewers I have are amazing and wonderful people. And it's my own little issue that I need to focus more on you guys. But I do, in part of my sort of openness and transparentness, I want you to know that every day I am being attacked. And every day I have to stop those attacks. There's never been a day that's gone by where I have not been attacked. And by attacked, I mean somebody is trying to cause harm to my channel or my audience by suggesting the information I have offered is not reliable or responsible or is factually incorrect. And these are complete strangers, often using fake names, who have no basis or foundation of why they should be listened to, why they consider themselves my equal or my superior. And it's really, really frustrating to me when I'm trying to cultivate a community to have people come in and try and destroy it for no good reason. So I'm just letting you know that daily I have to go and pull these weeds out of the comment section because they are toxic and I don't want them poisoning the community. And because I'm doing it so much, it feels good to talk about it a little bit and make you aware of what's going on behind the scenes. Because if I don't tell you, you may think I'm just sailing along here with no problems. But I am, there is a portion of folks that just come out of the woodwork with no other intention but to cause some psychological disruption. It's like a video game, I guess. They think this is not real, and let's see what it'll take to break this person mentally. And so they don't live very long in my channel. Their virtual life is basically removed from the community. But there's a lot of people using YouTube. So it's like this, it's like they're lined up as far as the eye can see. And some days there'll be just a handful, and other days it feels like half the comments are all toxic, venomous nastiness. And it does sort of disappoint me. But again, when I see all the kindness and the supportive nature here in the community, it far outweighs that. So my thanks to everybody who has contributed during today's stream. Let me give a shout out here. Tom Jackson just contributed $7.77. He says, another diagnostic bites the dust. Thomas contributed $2. Mama Goonie with a $2 contribution. Fixed your recommended for new computer build. Loving it so much. Right on. Darren Cluth and Johnny Jackwind, Mata Yoel, and Planet Cryos. Thank you, Planet Cryos. I missed that earlier. $2. Says, was out in the Mustang enjoying the good weather. That sounds like a good thing to do. I like that. Winston Anglu contributed $5 Canadian. Says, I have a Dell Precision M4800, and I have a small problem with the new Windows 10. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sure Dell is aware of it, if it's a problem with that particular model. Hugh Wong has contributed $2 and said, I forced the upgrade with no issues and it works perfect. Jupton19828 has contributed $10, said, is the 10900K worth the premium? I don't know. I suppose it depends what you're doing with the chip. For some people, the answer will be yes, and for other people, the answer will be no. I don't have one. I don't have one on order. They're sold out, and I can't find one. I also don't need one. I will probably build one for the sake of content, but I don't need it. Whether or not it's worth it is only, the value is whatever the person determines it to be. I don't know what else to tell you. Thank you to Sumworld and Hugh Wong, Aziz Rajan, Jean Tem, Christopher Donkers. Big thank you to Ryan Farmer for that big 100-pound contribution today. Robert Fontaine and Rochester NY87, Rain One Full and Frankie B, Guy Sternitsky, Michael Dane, South Bay Technology Gurus, Mira Ora and Brofeets and George Regalato, Nunman 1962, Samuel Ramos, Brofeets again, Mike Yazzie again, John Yasuda, thank you again, Madi Yoel, of course, my appreciation to all of you. Mark's Brother 715, Nicholas Menard, Rick Hubbard, Kevin Arsenault, Rick Rubisat, Ronaldo Torres, John Bluenose Studley, Hugh Wong, Mark Stevens, Ed Schwartz, Tom Jackson, Hugh Wong, Colin Hunt, Michael Dane with a $50 contribution. Very generous. Thanks, Michael. You're the man. No. You're the man. Rick Hubbard and Rick Lakes, and of course, the first contribution today, kicking us off before the stream started, Tony Wallow with $1.99. And then one just came in while I was talking. Hugh, oh no, I guess I got it. Okay, I'm caught up. I can go. I'm done. I'm going to call the customer. We're going to figure out the path on where we're going to go from here. Now, tomorrow, I'm scheduled to be building a computer remotely with Steve Bass. I don't think this has ever been done before. I think this is an original video, and I don't think anyone anywhere has ever done it. Basically, I've got all the computer parts here that Steve Bass has, all new in a box. I'm going to show Steve Bass, a man who doesn't build computers for a living, a man who is retired and is not a computer technician, but he is a technology enthusiast, and at one point was a professional technology journalist for PC World magazine for many, many years. He is going to build a computer step by step with me as we build the exact same computer together. He's 400 miles away. Like I said, I don't think it's ever been done. I'm looking forward to this experience. I hope you'll join us. If you want to buy those same parts and follow along with us, you don't have to follow along live. The parts list will be in the video tomorrow. And if you were to get a hold of those exact same parts, then you can follow the exact same steps in the exact same order that we show them. And you should expect the exact same results. Now, that's not saying you can't use different parts. But if you want to follow exactly along with us, this is about an $800 build. It's pretty well a budget build, but it's going to be good for just general use, not for gaming, but for literally everything else. You know, it'll do video editing and it'll do photo editing, but it's not going to be a rocket ship. It's not really designed for that purpose. So apart from, you know, video editing, gaming, intense photo editing, this is a good machine to do literally everything else pretty much, like browsing the web, email, all the stuff regular, normal people do use their computer for every day. Opening up Word, writing documents, opening up spreadsheets, maintaining your bills, whatever it is you do with your computer. The main concern would be gaming. Now, if you were to slap a graphics card into this build, you've got a gaming machine. It's not really that hard to build a gaming machine. And how good of a gaming machine? Well, that depends how much money you spend on your graphics card. You could slap in a $2,500 graphics card if you really wanted to on an $800 system. I don't recommend it, but you could do it. So I hope you join us for that. I'm really excited about it. That's coming up tomorrow. We should get started right around 3:15, just like we did today. I don't know that we'll be able to complete the build in one day. I don't know. It's more important that we do it right than we do it quickly. And if it takes more than one day, we'll make a part two. But we will cover every wire and every screw. And I'm very much looking forward to this project. As I mentioned, I don't think anybody's ever done it before. And it'll be the only place you can find that content right here tomorrow. Figure about 3 o'clock Pacific time, but if we haven't started yet, just stick around. It'll be starting maybe by 3:15, something like that. We'll get it started as soon after 3 o'clock as possible. Again, that's 3 p.m. Pacific time, which is generally when I've been starting my videos since this pandemic started because of limitations I have filming here. That being said, I want to thank all of you for the contributions, all of you in the chat for your kindness and your support, and for hanging out with me today. We've got just under 1,000 people watching, and you guys are very important to me. It's very important that we're all kind to each other, that we support each other, and that we're all brothers and sisters here on this planet for a very limited period of time. Life has its own struggles, whether it's trying to pay bills or dealing with health concerns or frustrations that beyond our control. Getting along with each other, that's something we can control. And it's nice to see so many people, so many like-minded individuals come together into a safe place here on the internet, which is often filled with nastiness. Finding nastiness on the internet's easy. Finding a supportive community like this, that's treasure. That's just finding diamonds in the garbage can. So thanks you guys for being those diamonds. I will see you all again very, very soon. And until then, hold on, I got to find my... I am cleverly stalling for time, or not so cleverly. There it is. Until then, bye for now.